Hello, this is Jason Bosch once again, and I am back for another edition of Brave New Education. And this is where I am running through some clips from a conference that was recently held called the ASU plus GSV Summit. It was held April 17th through the 19th, and they called their conference Brave New World. And it's about innovation in education, but it's about ed tech. It's an ed tech conference, so there's a lot of vendors, providers, bureaucrats. I think there was even some politicians there, but there was mostly it's companies that are offering education technology products. So yeah, so I this particular episode, I went through probably a good at least 7 hours of content, so you don't have to. But I took out the clips that I think are the most relevant or worth talking about. So this focus is actually on AI, artificial intelligence, as it relates to the learning space and ed tech. So I'll just start going through these clips, and we'll chat about them. Okay, so this first session was with Deborah Quazzo, who's the co-founder of the summit, the ASU GSV Summit. And we also have Michael Moe, who is the founder and CEO of Global Silicon Valley, which is an investment bank that funds a lot of this technology. And then we have Amit Sevak, who is the CEO of Educational Testing Service, ETS. And I wasn't really familiar with them, but I guess they've been around for a while. They were founded in 1947, and they do testing nationwide, testing services. And they're moving heavily into the ed tech space, as well as this track and trace and this lifelong learning and skills badges and a lot of the stuff we've been talking about. So yeah, that's this first one.
We're really embracing the use of AI to help us scale our operations. We're signing on new contracts, Michael, at a scale which I'm very excited about. And so with our commitments that we're making, we want to be able to build, deliver, and score assessments at scale. So being able to use AI to design assessments and build them, to be able to deliver them, and to be able to score them is a huge advantage that we have. So that's one example of many where we're using AI in the actual operations. We're also excited about the use of AI from a security standpoint. And this is a bit of the foe as well as the friend. We have technologies like eye gaze. So when someone's taking an assessment in a computer-based test, so they're in front of a screen, we're able to use artificial intelligence to check how are their eye movements moving around, keystroke analysis to see how the keystrokes are shaping up, to see are they themselves the one taking the test. So we're using artificial intelligence in all kinds of ways.
So yeah, that's the only clip that I took out of this one. And I just thought it was interesting how he said that they're using AI in order to track eye movements, to supposedly see if you're you're cheating. Apparently AI can know if you're cheating, whether or not how your eyes are moving. But I just think about the effects of all this surveillance technology is going to have on us, and also what are the other functions of this technology that can be used for dual use as well. This next one is Ethan Malik. I think sounds a lot like Malik, but he's a professor of the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania, and this talk was called AI Required: Teaching in a New World. And interesting thing about Ethan is he actually is the one who invented the paywall. So I thought that was relevant. And I guess he was part of creating an AI guide for teachers, how to use AI, called One Useful Thing. Their website's oneusefulthing.org. So they have their website is oneusefulthing.org. You go to it and they immediately want your email address. Apparently they don't have the AI in order to grab that, but they created this guide for helping teachers to utilize AI in the classroom, both for the students and for the teachers as well. So So that's Ethan Malik.
What I think AI is going to look like in classrooms in the near future. And so the answer is it's going to be undetectable, ubiquitous, and transformative. And all of these images, by the way, I did in Mid-Journey in 3 seconds. The same tool is available everywhere. You can use GPT-4, the latest model, free through Bing. Hint, be in the purple creative mode. That's what uses GPT-4. And you can actually use this system right now to do everything. It's in the hands of every teacher everywhere, right? So everything that you guys are doing in building EdTech, there's now a universal AI in everybody's hands. It is ubiquitous not just among students, but among teachers. Not everyone's figured that out yet, but they will soon. This is the trend in AI test scores. And keep in mind, GPT 3.5, that's Chat GPT, that was released back at the end of November, and GPT-4 just came out. The bar exam, this is the percentile it scored among all human students, right? Not the percent right. It went from 5% right to scoring 85%, better than 85% of people on the bar exam. At the 99th percent of the GRE or verbal, at the 80th percentile in quantitative, just passed the neurosurgeon bar exam, qualifying exam, a paper just showed a couple days ago. This is changing the way we think of testing, right? If we're testing people on these kind of characteristics, the AI is passing that. What does that mean? Again, past singularity, I can't give you the answer, but it certainly forces us to grapple with this in some kind of useful, interesting way. So I actually have mandatory AI in my class. I want to show you my...
So I'll stop right there. Yeah, he has mandatory AI in his class, and this Chat GPT thing, which is super brand new. He's going full board with it, and so he's talking about how it's the AI is doing better on these tests. But there's also problems with the tests themselves in terms of there's biases built into the tests. And, in terms of like, is this particular thing a fact or not? That's one question. But, we get into the questions of what is the goal and what is the purpose of education. And people have different ideas about that. But I think I can show here that the purpose really is about job training and about getting people to get into the workforce is really the primary purpose of that. But what does that mean when people are relying on GPT basically to provide the answers for them essentially? And he'll get into here in a minute about how he actually supports that essentially.
AI is still the best question, and I'll make sure you have access to all of it. So you don't have to read it all, don't worry. But I required everyone to use AI for everything, okay? So I gave them the basic rules. It lies to you a lot. You're responsible for its content, right?
So I'll just, what he said there, it lies to you a lot. You're responsible for its content. So just, use this tool knowing that it's going to lie to you. I mean, I guess in one sense, if someone were really good, they could I discovered that this thing is lying to you, but the logic of using this tool that's lying to you a lot is a little funny.
It rewards good work. If you don't do good effort into putting together prompts, you won't get good outcomes from those prompts.
So putting in good prompts. So really, this is shifting into how do you ask the AI the right questions. And as far as I'm concerned, it's removing you to some extent. It's having you do something different than you've done traditionally, but it's also creating a heavy dependency. It's a different way of doing things, that's for sure.
Right? It's a tool, and it's one you have to acknowledge. So they have to list all the prompts they used and write a reflection on what worked and what didn't.
So list all the prompts that you used, all the questions you asked the GPT, in order for it to get you to supposedly the right answer. And this is a massive radical shift as opposed to actually learning something versus just learning how to ask the AI the right questions, the right prompts.
So it completely changed how the class worked. Embracing AI is really powerful. One class, for example, before AI, I had the students come up with a theoretical product design. It was about designing new products, and create and test a really early prototype, write an outline of the results. With AI in the class, it became come with a product design, build the product using laser cutters, build a working app, create a marketing material, create graphics, write a full report. All of that, right, and for people who've never done any of this before.
When he says doing all this stuff, he's actually, it's not you doing it, it's you prompting, you're prompting a lot of this work is just you prompting the AI to give you what you know, all the things that you need to do it. So he's making it sound like you're doing more work, but you're actually doing less.
Right. And so it was.
As far as I can tell. Now, if I'm wrong, please correct me. But just from listening to this talk and hearing what he's saying, that's what it sounds like to me.
They were building board games in this class. Here's some happy students with the outputs they came up with. This was for just a 4-week-long class, right? Like, this is not that many sessions together. So we can expect more. I don't accept papers that aren't good anymore, because the minimum you can do is turn in a good paper. So why am I going to force you to write a bad one, right?
So he's saying that, you know, there's no excuse for not writing a good paper, because I'm basically letting you use the AI to do it. And you're just there to help guide the AI and actually teach the AI. That's really what this is about. It's about teaching the AI, and we'll get to that in a second here. But yeah, so he says, I'm not going to make people write a bad paper, because, I mean, apparently in his mind that they couldn't possibly write a good paper on their own without the AI. He's saying, well, now you have an AI. There's no excuses to write a bad paper because you have the AI.
This is just a couple examples, and I'll put a link at the end. You can give away the prompts for all these things. So, and you can just experiment, by the way. There's no magic in prompt crafting. Just use the AI enough, and you will figure out how to make good prompts. There's not, anyone's trying to sell you courses, don't worry about it. It's figure outable, right? But this is an example of creating explanations, right? Explain photosynthesis to elementary school kids.
So that's the prompt. You know, he just asks it, explain photosynthesis to elementary school kids. And then the text, that's what the AI does for you. So this is from the teacher, you know, asking the AI how to teach, essentially.
It's using analogies, right? It's like baking a cake. The plant needs specific ingredients, sunlight and water and carbon dioxide, and a kitchen tool, chlorophyll, to make a delicious cake, glucose. Or imagine it's a solar-powered toy car. Any level I want, I can now create explanations. I can create customized information. If I said this kid is interested in becoming a chef growing up, it would change all the explanations to chef-based explanations. This is all something you can do right now, right? You don't need a tool to do this. You don't need an ed tech technology. You can literally go and just say, I'd like to explain this concept to my class. My class is interested in, you know, in whatever TV show they want, Mr. Beast, whatever they care about, and you can have the explanations in that context. It's very easy to do, right? And similarly, low-stakes testing. We all hate it. It's the single best approach, though, to getting people to learn, right? Not just for assessment, but it turns out tests do lots of great things for us mentally. It increases our ability to recall-related facts, interleaving, and it can be annoying to generate all kinds of testing material. It does it for you, right? And with just the right prompt, you'll get good testing material.
So he's basically asking the AI to write a test, and he just puts in the parameters, like, this is what we want it to do.
So this is even without moving to a new world of tutoring. Your job gets easier. It does better work for you. And this is leaving aside all this sort of sketchier things. It grades better than my TAs do, but I'm still grading by hand for now. But there is all of this new kind of technology, and you can do all of this, right? You don't have to wait for someone to provide this to you.
A TA is a teacher's assistant, so he's saying this thing actually grades better than his teacher's assistants. So I don't know what teacher's assistants he has, but you know, that's kind of sad.
This is available to you right now, right? And you could save time and effort as an instructor and do better teaching as a result. I've been using AI a lot recently, so I decided to do something. I decided to ask AI a question. What if I just used GPT-4? Okay, so again, I've got a 15-person team. They're all brilliant. I've got creative fiction writers, and I've got coders, all these people working together, pedagogy experts. What if I just asked GPT, hey, Chat GPT, I want to do a deliberate practice about how to conduct negotiations. You're my negotiation teacher. Simulate a scenario in which I have to engage in negotiation. You'll fill the role of one party, I'll be the other. You'll ask for my response for each step in the scenario, and then you'll give me details of what they do, and you'll grade my response at the end. If I do well, you'll give me a harder task. If I do badly, you'll give me an easier task. And it just started doing it, right? It's not 100.
So the thing about this that you have to keep in mind is this is not simply the AI assisting the teachers or assisting the students. This is the students and the teachers teaching the AI. The teachers are the students and the teachers, and the real student is actually the AI. It's just, it's not your typical student where it's collecting information from one student and one teacher. It's collecting from actually thousands, millions, and you know, I guess they have over 1 billion users now, from what I understand. And so you can't think of it in the traditional sense, but it's learning from you. Even though it seems like it's smarter and it's coming back with information that maybe it wasn't in your in your RAM. But yeah, so anyways, keep that in mind.
It's not 100% there, but it's 90% of the way to what would have taken us, and we're very good at this, weeks to build, right? Months to build with a whole team.
So, you've cut out this whole process of building something. But in learning and in education, it's the building it is the going through the process is part of the learning. So just to have this thing do it for you, you have to question, what that does to they keep using the term learner, which really I'll talk about that later, but it's kind of a gross, as far as I'm concerned, a kind of a gross way of describing people. It's kind of a dehumanizing term, like, oh, the learner, these are the learners, but the student, and their ability to comprehend all this stuff, and removing the process of actually going through it. What are the consequences of that?
I can do it with a paragraph, right? And we're experimenting right now with how we can do this with 3 or 4 paragraphs. And right now we have a version of the game that we just worked on this week where you see a little video of me talking, and then we fed everything I have spoken about the topic into the AI, and you can now ask me questions in the AI. And then the next phase, we spin up a AI that is your counterparty to negotiate with, and you negotiate with that person. And then a third AI appears and grades you on your performance, right? End to end, taking it is 5 paragraphs of work, right? A little bit of fine tuning, but we don't need a huge team. It's done.
So this isn't about the development of the students. This is about creating an efficient system for doing whatever work it is that they want to use this for doing, building the metaverse, doing the coding, or doing all this work. It's not about the student.
If your advantage is that we had this very elaborate simulation system, and now we can do this with a prompt, what does that mean for your education system, right? It means a lot of empowering teachers to do stuff, but what does it mean for the ed tech providers here in the room? Simulate a classroom of diverse students asking me questions, have them ask me the questions, and let me practice it, right? Sentence, it just does it, right? Is it 100% correct? No, of course, it hallucinates and makes stuff up.
So that phrase right there, it hallucinates and makes stuff up. That's an important thing to keep in mind. Now he says, eventually it's not going to do that. Eventually it's not going to do that. Well, it's impossible for it never to not. It's always going to have to take a side. There's always going to be biases built into it. There's nothing that, is without bias. So if it gets more sophisticated and gets a little bit more accurate in terms of not telling just overt lies, which it actually does. Somebody recently asked Chat GPT about the work of Alison McDowell. And the thing that it fed back was a complete inaccurate portrayal of what her work is and what her position is. So that was kind of an interesting thing that Alison shared with me. Alison did do it. Somebody sent it to her, but.
Is it pretty amazing, right? Yes, right? And as anyone who's an instructor for the room knows, you can be teaching a class and get everything exactly right, and your students learn something completely different than what you were saying, right? So I'm a little less worried about the lying in this piece, because it's not usually harmful lying. There are facts wrong, but every teacher gets things wrong too, and we'll get better at facts. We don't need to wait.
So he's not worried about the lying. So. Because it'll get better, but in the meantime, your children or your students, or I guess it's supposed to be a bit higher ed, but not necessarily. But the students are the test subjects, the guinea pigs in this process of getting the AI to get better.
We don't need to wait for newer AI. This is not about there's a lot of obsession over what happens next. It doesn't matter. The singularity for us as educators and as ed tech providers is already here. So if you're not a huge user of Chat GPT, I think everybody needs 10 or 20 hours in this at a minimum, and I think you should be using it for every task you do. You'll find it's bad at some things, good at some things. That's the only way to learn. There is no.
He wants people to use this for everything that they do. Not so much it's going to benefit them, but it's going to help the thing learn. It'll get better and faster the more people use it. So that's what that's about.
Good at some things. That's the only way to learn. There is no rule book. You shouldn't wait for a memo to come down. Just start doing it.
So that was Ethan Malik. Okay, so this next one is called Unlocking the Next Billion Software Creators with AI. A fireside chat with Amjad Masad and Arjun Singh. And Amjad Masad is the CEO of Replit. And Replit is an open source AI software that they actually got from Salesforce. And they're also using some stuff from Google as well. And then he's interviewed by Arjun Singh, who is the co-founder of Gradescope. And I hadn't actually looked up Gradescope. But anyways, the Replit, the main person here is Amjad. Let me look up Replit. And here's Replit's website. Build software collaborative with the power of AI on any device without spending a second to set up. Write code with Ghostwriter and AI-powered pair programmer. Collaborate in our real-time multiplayer editor. Build, test, and deploy directly from the browser. So anyways, this is their Replit.
In the past, when you learned a little bit of code, the best you could do is write a tic-tac-toe game. You spend a month learning how to code. You can't really do anything useful with that skill. But now, if you spend a month learning how to code, learn the basics of syntax and the basics of program structure, you can work with an AI to build a startup. And we have a lot of people who come to Replit with zero coding experience. Like literally, they've never written a line of code. We have this course called 100 Days of Python, where it's 20 minutes a day out of your busy schedule. And we thought that it'll take you 100 days to do something useful. Instead, people are taking anywhere between 15 and 30 days.
So, and I apologize if the audio is getting out of sync. I've got this patch through in a kind of crazy way, so because I wanted to be able to scrub it and do it, but I still haven't got it dialed in perfectly. Yeah, so the future of work, a large amount of the future of work is going to be around coding. And so they need to get people to code, but they're also, so that what they're trying to do is they want to simplify the coding process, and they want the AI to do a lot of the coding, but they can't, rely completely on the AI just yet. So they're doing this simplified thing where you can come in and like start coding right away without actually having a very large knowledge base on some of the under the hood aspects of it.
And then they're able to build like really large scale software. I was talking to someone the other day who just did 2 weeks of coding and now has a software app, 3,000 lines of code written with GPT-4. And they're saying every time they hit a bug or they hit a problem, GPT is actually teaching them and they're learning along the way. And
again, like the GPT is learning from them as well. And eventually, probably GPT won't even need them once they understand there's certain things that the AI just they can't compute, that doesn't know how to do. So it needs us to learn that. But yeah, so this is kind of a similar thing with the other professor there about, you just give it prompts. So here you give it prompts and it helps write code. And then you'll go in and you'll tweak the code, you'll fix the code. You need to know a little bit to help kind of guide it. But most of the coding is actually being done by the AI itself.
The people I admire the most in the sort of computer industry is Alan Kay. Alan Kay is an early computer pioneer. He worked at Apple. He was the first to design a tablet. And he said that the computer revolution hasn't started yet. The reason he said that is because most people are consumers of software, are consumers of computers, not producers. The original vision of computing was we were all creating software. But over time, there's this schism between the creator and the consumer. So, after, graphical user interfaces became mainstream, sort of you have this world where you have the software creators, the software engineers in Silicon Valley, in the ivory tower of Silicon Valley, and everyone else is the consumer. And I think that creates a lot of problems. Everyone is talking about algorithms and how inscrutable algorithms are and how they run our lives, and we do not know really what they're doing. And I think that's a symptom of this problem, of this division between creator and consumer. So my hope is that we go to a world where, every kid learns how to code, and, everyone will be able to use software the way it's meant to be used, and giving you the full power of the computer. And then the question, what kind of world will that be? I think it's really hard to predict, because, if you think about the printing press, that was a huge moment in human history. And after the printing press, we had the democratic revolutions, and we had scientific revolutions, and we had all these things that we could have only gotten with reading and writing. But it took 100 years from when the printing press happened until there was actual literacy and there was actual change happening. So I think in the same way, I don't think we really know what the world looks like when everyone can use software to the full extent of their power. But it feels like it's going to be something positive.
So yeah, I don't know if I would. It's kind of hard for me to compare this to the printing press. I mean, I think there's something radically and fundamentally different about this. Whereas the printing press, you write words and it just copies your words. It's not there's a huge difference between an artificial intelligence that's actually steering you and directing you and guiding you, and collecting information from a lot of different sources, and cybernetics. Very different situation. But I disagree with him that this is going to be a positive thing. It's not to say there aren't like use cases. Yeah. Like I don't want to learn. I use video editing software. And there's a lot of aspects to like how the software works that I have no idea how it works. And there's no way I would ever be able to make videos if I had to spend all my time on, having to build the software itself. But again, there's an aspect about this, this AI that's really not being addressed, very much. I mean, they might just give it a little bit of like a little nod here and there. Oh yeah, there's some concerns, but don't worry about those. Just like go, just do it. With respect to how it's actually going to change us and how it's going to steer us.
Yeah, so let's switch gears just a little bit there, because obviously a lot of the code is going to be written by bots, and one of the things that has got a lot of hype recently is Auto GPT. Maybe tell us a little bit about what that is and kind of what you think that and those complex agents might mean for software development.
So real quick before he answers this, I'll just say something too about the Auto GPT and how the AI is actually operating. It's not entirely independent. I mean, there are protocols built into it that kind of point it in different directions and other directions. So this isn't just like, oh, find the best answer. There are and there will be biases and directions built into the AI systems themselves in terms of endpoint. Like where do you want to go? And there are different layers, there's different protocol layers. So you might just be like, oh, write me an app for, keeping my schedule or something like that, something simple like that. But there are different layers to this that are also playing a role in terms of steering.
Yeah, so the original use case behind GPT-like software is, what Microsoft called CoPilots. And the idea is that, they're sitting next to you, they're completing your work, they're helping you, fix mistakes. And that's like not a fundamentally new paradigm of software. We've always had things that helps you with grammar. Everyone uses and loves Grammarly. These are all Copilot-style software, right? It's just a much more powerful technology. Now, AutoGPT and sort of autonomy is somewhat fundamentally new technology, which is you're actually giving the bot a higher level task, like book me travel for a family of 5. And then through very creative series of prompting and reflection, the bot goes and actually breaks down the task into a lot of different tasks and starts to follow these chain of tasks and starts to do them.
So they're always going to give you like the least threatening, use case scenario on these things, like, oh, I'm just booking travel or whatever, which even within that, like, okay, you're booking travel, then you have all these different parties that have different interests to, screw you over in your travel booking or or whatnot. But there's problems associated with that. But in thinking about these things, always think about dual use and what are the other functions and purposes that it could serve, in terms of people just outsourcing their activities, and even their decision making to an AI, and like they outsource their thinking as well. Like that's the key thing for me. So this next one is called a primer on Chat GPT and generative AI explosion. The speakers are Saurabh Bajaj, who's the Chief Technology Officer of CoRise, and Aaron Megiddo, who is the founder of Maximal Learning.
If you aren't using generative AI to help you in your job every single day right now, then you should be. And that really, I can't impress that enough, and we'll talk about use cases and examples of people that don't think they should be, and now that they are, what does it look like? If you aren't using it literally every single day, you should be. That's takeaway number one.
So again, this is that same message we heard before. You need to be using this for everything you do. Use it every day. They're really pushing this hard. Even though they're like, oh, but it lies to you and makes shit up.
Takeaway number two is, if you think it's limited by all the various things you're reading about, or that you've tried and it's too simplistic, or it doesn't answer correctly, or it doesn't know how to do math, or it doesn't know how to do attribution, whatever limitation that you think is out there, I can tell you from having been involved in a lot of kind of the early work, and Saurabh even more than I can, the rate of progress on the technology right now is such that any limitation you think of right now is not going to be a limitation in months, maybe a year or two down the road, but it won't be. So don't plan what you're doing around the limitations that the technology might have today. That's takeaway number two.
So think about that. Like, don't even worry about the limitations. Don't let that affect your decision about whether or not you use it or how you use it. I mean, like, what kind of terrible advice is that? What other situation or scenario would, like you get in a car and say, don't worry about like the mechanical flaws of this vehicle, just like get in and drive it. It's like, what kind of insane logic is that? And just remember, like, virtually all these people at this event, they're all representing some industry. They're all looking to make a profit. So that's a major influencer on their selling this, and then just wanting to just ignore any negative things about it, and actually not even understanding what all this is for. Which I would argue they're setting up a global, large-scale system of cybernetic governance through all these interoperable systems, whether it be through ed tech, smart city tech, whatever, health tech.
Anybody, not just the teachers and the students, should be using this on a daily basis to help them. A way to think about it, and a way that I think about it, in talking to somebody else that again was in a college context, was think about it like having a think tank. And if you have a personal think tank, one of the things that I encourage, any problem that either one of you, anybody in the audience is facing, go to Chat GPT or go to Bing and anywhere where you experiment with this stuff, and ask it to come up not with an answer, ask it to come up with 15 different answers to the same question. Because that's when you go those precious moments when we get to have an offsite and brainstorm and hear collaborative ideas from 15 different people. Or if you could afford a personal think tank where you can outsource a question to a strategy think group where they have 10 different people coming up with 10 different answers. It is largely true that no institution at scale allows use of Google and laptops during test taking, definitely not high stakes test taking. No institution at scale, and that's been around for 20 years plus. No institution at scale allows use of the phone throughout test taking. That's been around for smartphones for 10 years. And no institution at scale during test taking, just as to pick a point and and kind of individual exams and what have you, high stake exams, lets kids collaborate on their answers. And kids have been with other kids in school for much longer than 20 years. And we haven't figured that out. Whereas if you stop and think about your day job, any moment of your day job, You are using the web, you are using your phone, and you are talking to your colleagues and collaborating. And that change, so anybody that tells me, oh, we're all in on adopting Chat GPT into our school system, like, okay, let me tell me, how are you doing on allowing kids to collaborate, use their phones, call anybody, open web on all their tests? Oh, no, we don't do that. It's not allowed. Like, okay, you haven't convinced me that you're really willing to change the systems and the constraints around.
Okay, so so I have major issues with the entire education system from K through 12 to higher ed, and with testing and all these other things. But think about what this guy is saying here. He's basically saying, like, if you don't allow kids to cheat, like, the kids don't need to know the information. That's really what he's saying. You don't need to know anything anymore, because you can just, ask the Chat GPT and it'll tell you. And you don't even know whether or not, at a certain point, you're not even going to know whether or not it's telling you the truth or not. So I think there's something seriously wrong with this approach to, we just need to, like, let the Chat GPT and the AI explosion take over. Anyways, what do you think about that? I think there's something kind of fucked up about it.
The term that you'll hear and probably heard and read a lot about is CoPilot, is a term that is used. And thinking about this as...
And these terms, there's like a group thing that happens with these things. They all have like these terms that they use that I imagine there are actual think tanks that come up with these terms that then get thrown around in here, like CoPilot.
Is a term that is used. And thinking about this as a boost for the tutors and instructors that you do have, right? Like, how can an instructor that maybe can scale today to 10 students, I'm inventing, to 10 students today, how can they use this to take the inputs from 100 students and the questions that they have, and have it create personalized learning plans for 100 students that they just need to quickly look at and maybe add a little bit more to. And then it becomes a lot of the talk is about how does it help students learn. Think about how it boosts and becomes an amplifier to the instructor in that CoPilot sense. Actually, a lot of...
So again, in thinking about these things, remember that there are corporations behind this, and there are securitized debt markets where they actually want to securitize your children and their future outcomes. There's all these financial interests that are essentially betting for and against the success of students. So think about that as well. When you look at the people in these rooms that are promoting these things, that it's not purely about like, hey, we care about your child we care about the student and their ability to learn. This is about markets, and this is about a future system of governance. So this isn't what people think it is.
Actually, a lot of the discovery of what the challenges are is going to come from trial and error here. And having the teachers or having, whoever, or whether it's teacher instructors or academic, sitting with and trying and seeing what comes up as a way to discover the edges and discover the limitations and see, okay, you're doing something which you shouldn't do. The books haven't been written on it yet, right? And the pedagogy hasn't been written on it yet. And I think that trial and error in the classroom to go discover it needs to happen. The best analogy I've heard for this technology so far is think about it like electricity, which is something that we cannot live without anymore. It has its dangers, for sure, but it transformed every industry.
The trial and error, he's talking about, we want your kids to be the guinea pigs in helping this thing learn and helping it get better for whatever purposes and outcomes that are behind it, which are not simply about what prompts you're putting into it. There are other layers to this that are not being discussed here. So this next one was called AI Personalized Learning. It included Andrew Grauer, who's the CEO and co-founder of Learnio, a Course Hero, Lex Bayer, who's the CEO of Quizlet, Jamie Candie, who's the president and CEO of Edmentum, and Himanshu Palsul, who's the CEO of Cornerstone On Demand. So these are all just different ed tech companies.
It's the wild west of technology in corporations today. There are systems that are
disconnected. There are systems that are used by lines of businesses versus corporate. And our biggest challenge is creating sort of a homogeneous look at learning and making sure a learner, an employee, once he or she join a company, have a clear career path and clear skills ontology driven by personalized AI engines. So
yeah, they want to homogenize education to make sure everyone is on their path, the career path, to learning.
It's a great place to be in, but I literally think, Jamie, you hand them over to us, and it's our responsibility once they come into the corporate world.
So you hand them over to us. What an interesting way of talking about human beings. But like later on, like again, these terms come up. Human capital is one that I just cringe when I hear. But talking about human beings as capital, and yet nobody bats an eye like there's something wrong with that. Like, no, yeah, that's not a just, healthy, humanized way of looking at people as capital. But that's what's all, driving this are these economic forces, and driving those economic forces are other forces of steering.
In December, OpenAI and Chat GPT went from 20 million visits in that month to 300 million. And the following months, it went to 600 million visits, to 1.1 billion visits, to 1.6 billion visits in 4 months. And we were thinking that some of these advancements would happen over a number of years, and we've been working on the problems associated with question answering, summarization, translation problems, and language models. But the degree of accuracy that has been able to get to market is just incredibly fast.
In March, we launched a new product called QChat, which is the world's first AI tutor. Powered by Chat GPT's API, we had early access to their API. And it does just that. It's a conversational experience that's really fun and engaging for students. A lot of us probably think about Chat GPT as somewhere you go to get answers. Tell me something. Actually, we've used it in reverse. We've used it as a Socratic method. When we use Chat GPT, it's asking the students questions. So the students come in, they're trying to learn some material. They say what they're going to learn, and then we start questioning them on it. We try to deepen their understanding. When they get stuck, we give them hints, and we keep trying to prompt the student to give us the answers and help them on the learning journey.
So yeah, we're prompting the students. The students are prompting this. It's all about the prompt. The future is the prompt.
Yeah, I mean, increasingly we have a global workforce. The world is flatter. There's more learning that's happening across boundaries and geographies.
How can you take somebody at a moment of a question with a form of inquiry-based learning where you get the input and then there's going to be some sort of feedback. Feedback is inherent when conferring, and just, I think, giving the opportunity in our jargon of having human in the loop. Having the ability to give a potential recommendation back, an explanation, an answer. In the case of writing, it could be, here's a grammar error, here's a spell check error. Here's a different way to write that with more fluency, more creativity, etc. But having then the opportunity to do something with that as an individual.
Speaking of...
So yeah, this whole thing is like, who's steering who here? Like, you're leaning on this Chat GPT to give you all these answers, and then you can say, well, I don't like that, or I don't like this or that. But as time goes on and people become more reliant on this thing, it will literally just be steering them in whatever direction that's built into the protocols.
Speaking of knowledge workers, once they enter the workforce, a CHRO once told me, the head of HR, that we know more about our employee the day before they're hired than we know a couple years later. We don't know what skills they got. We don't know how they got assessed. We don't know. There's a guy, Walmart told me that there's a forklift operator in Portland who speaks 2 languages who can also work the till. We still go back to things like LinkedIn, and if you don't find it, you go hire someone new. So this whole skills mess that we are into today, and in fact, I made a decision last year in October to open up our skills database. We have 53,000 skills, and say, folks, everybody build on these skills. This is not something that needs to be proprietary. I shouldn't be competing with somebody else saying I have more skills than you do. I don't own those skills.
So I think the great responsibility, the great learning is let's use and harness this technology to do what we do best and worry about and know that there are politicians and lawyers and legislators and knowledge workers who will worry about the other artifacts versus today all of us admiring the problem and worrying about, is this sentient? Is there a conscience? Is there hallucination? All these things in technology, it's a great, the WhatsApp University will graduate on that with opinions that everybody seems to have, but I'm not that worried about it.
So
I hope I'm right.
But he's not worried about whether or not there's hallucinations or it's lying to you. That's just a matter of opinion, and everyone has an opinion, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, that was interesting.
We have to be very careful, right? Do no harm to kids. And so we have to make sure we're really excited about this possibility of going from personalized learning 1.0 to personalized learning 2.0. And so what do I mean by that? So the way that our personalized learning tools work is you have all these standards that you have to know, right, in public education as a child going through each grade level. And you're measured against those standards. And so we go in with our diagnostics, we figure out what you've learned and what you haven't learned, and then we help you catch up on the things you haven't learned. 1.0 is just figuring out the things and serving up basically the same set of content for all kids, just organized differently. 2.0, what our product organization is working on, is understanding more about you and having a whole variety of things based on what you're interested in and the best way that you learn, still covering the same standards, right? Still going in and figuring out what you know or don't know, where we need to get you as that third grader, but giving you a lot more variety in terms of how we serve that up. So that's going to take things like understanding more interest inventory and all these different things about the child, the whole child, and then serving up the academic content in a way that that child wants to consume it in a whole different variety of ways to do it.
And that's lip service. I mean, this thing is clearly like, there's so many harmful things about all of this that are just being utterly ignored.
So the way that our personalized learning tools work is you have all these standards that you have to know, right, in public education as a child going through each grade level. And you're measured against those standards. And so we go in with our diagnostics, we figure out what you've learned and what you haven't learned, and then we help you catch up on the things you haven't learned. 1.0 is just figuring out the things and serving up basically the same set of content for all kids, just organized differently. 2.0, what our product organization is working on, is understanding more about you and having a whole variety of things based on what you're interested in and the best way that you learn, still covering the same standards, right? Still going in and figuring out what you know or don't know, where we need to get you as that third grader, but giving you a lot more variety in terms of how we serve that up.
So again, what you know and what you don't know, what this all requires collecting massive amounts of data on not just like, oh, what are your skills? Like, we tested you. And again, these are third graders. This isn't even high school. They're talking about third graders. Yeah, I don't even know. A lot of this stuff, I don't even know what to say about it at this point. I'm just kind of appalled. I'll work on it though.
So that's going to take things like understanding more interest inventory and all these different things about the child, the whole child.
Interest inventory, like we need to take an inventory on your interest.
Whole child, and then serving up the academic content in a way that that child wants to consume it in a whole different variety of ways to do it.
So the next one was called Automation and AI Supercharging Learning in the Flow of Work. And you'll hear that term flow a lot in all these spaces. This is Brandon Samut, who's the Chief People Officer at Zapier. Ken Babcock, co-founder and CEO of Tango, Melanie Fillet, CEO of Speckit, and Christina Yu, Chief Marketing Officer of Novo Ed. So
this amount of information that is increasing by the day that employees are expected to memorize and know, your traditional kind of course or destination or one-time training just doesn't adapt because there is just so much change happening every single day. And that's where I think just-in-time learning or learning in the flow of work becomes really relevant because it's all about how do we make sure that, to what Ken was mentioning, the right information meets the employee when and where they need it. Because you can have two employees join on the same day, right? Let's take two sellers, for example. But depending on whether they were competing against the same competitor or not, whether they are selling to the same industry or not, they're going to have different knowledge at different points in time. And so I think that, learning in the flow of work.
So she says they're going to have different point knowledge at different points in time. And so think about this in terms of compartmentalizing knowledge, and how a lot of the system runs is because everybody just has their little piece of it and nobody puts the whole thing together. And I think that's what they want. They don't want people to actually see the bigger picture of what's going on. So it's like what they're doing is they want to compartmentalize knowledge. And you can only learn as you go, like you know, as you need it. You don't need to learn all this other stuff. You know, just ask the AI, ask your little chat bot, your CoPilot, your assistant, for what you need when you need it. And just trying to condition us into getting into this space where we don't actually possess the knowledge ourselves. It's just, you know, you just ask whenever you need to ask, and it'll provide you the answers that it's going to provide you.
Really allows.
And this is in the workspace, so it's like moving us towards to, like, you don't just, like she said, you don't just do a training. We want you to be, you know, constantly, you know, learning. So it's you learn as you go, like, but it's like a lifelong customer. That's what it's all about. And remember, these people are all you know, they're all basically pitchmen and women for these different companies. So we can get into the questions of, you know, what role business has in education. I actually think it shouldn't have anything to do with education myself. I think the two things they have different sets of goals, purposes, and values that are actually at odds with one another. But I also thought it was funny too, the filming of the tech. You know, I do conferences, and I film and do AV tech work at different events, and like the AV on this thing was absolutely terrible. Some of the audio was going up and down. I had to fix the audio. On this shot, they like literally cut off one of the speakers. Pretty lame. But that's an aside just from my because that's what I noticed.
Companies to personalize learning in a way that your traditional e-learning or courses or webinar trainings just doesn't. And I think that's really the biggest opportunity for companies, is to adapt their learning to be much more agile and adapted to today's pace of learning, right? Much more bite-sized, to your point, micro-learning, but adding this element of context, adding this element of time that, you know, traditionally just hasn't existed.
Okay, so listen to this next woman, and listen to the way she talks. There's something a little troubling to me about the language that's used here, because it doesn't feel like it's coming from an authentic, genuine place. It's almost like all these words are learned, and they're using them that are supposed to, like, I guess, you know, mean something to people. And that's typical within the business world generally.
I think that AI and generative AI actually really raises the criticality of higher order human skills. And so I think that organizations of the future will be distinguished by their ability to rapidly sense make in this VUCA world, this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, and then to rapidly crystallize not just knowledge, but mindsets, behaviors, systems, whole processes, and then rapidly transmit them from cohort to cohort. So I think I'm really fascinated by this concept of corporate memory. And this is where learning in the flow of work meets creator economy, because I think what we can do is, if we're creating all this content as a byproduct of work, like PowerPoints and videos and just documents, we can use AI and platforms to capture this content and create corporate memory and then pass that on to other cohorts of learners. And I think that ability to create corporate memory and pass that on is going to be the future of competitive advantage.
So yeah, it's this weird, like, marketing office speak. It's very, very bizarre. But some of the ideas of, like, corporate memory, I thought that concept was interesting, because I'd never heard that term before, corporate memory. So I need to dig more into that, but I thought that was an interesting framing, that, you know, they're trying to build corporate memory. The next one is called Can AI Extend Learner Lifetime Value? It's John Katzman, CEO of a company called Noodle. Trish Sparks, CEO of Clever, acquired by Kahoot. Shravan Goli, CEO of Coursera, and Anton Pavlovsky, CEO, founder of Headway. Is moderated by Katie Hui, who's the director of William Blair, who's a major sponsor of this thing. And I need to look up let's see, William Blair. Who's William Blair? I think they're probably a capital fund, I'm guessing. It's a multinational investment bank. So William Blair was one of the major sponsors of this, and they're a big international investment firm that obviously invests a lot in ed tech.
My name is Anton. I'm CEO and founder of Headway. Headway is a B2C company that focuses on bite-sized micro-learning. So basically, we're building a micro-learning champion, and like our style of learning is TikTok style, like as if everyone is Gen Z. But it's for actually not just Gen Zs. It's for like busy adults. So that's who we serve.
So like TikTok style micro learning, think about that concept, the idea of micro learning. And what you're talking about is getting little badges and, oh, you did this, good for you. Here, you got your little thing, and then being judged on what badges you have, and having your access be determined by your micro learning credentials. So and as if everyone's Gen Z. But it's for everybody. How did he word that?
As if everyone is Gen Z, but it's for actually not just Gen Zs. It's for like busy adults. So that's who we serve.
First of all, when I think about AI, one of the examples is access, so global access. So the challenge for us is like when we think about a lot of the courses and the certificates, we want to make it available in lots of different languages. And when you think about the full course, it has lectures, videos, quizzes, assessments, all kinds of things that reinforce the learning that's happening, right? And so to translate something like that, today it costs like roughly $10,000 to translate that. But with machine learning, we're actually starting to reduce it to $30. And so that's the power of AI. So we're looking at launching almost 2,000 courses in 7 different languages by the end of this year. So all of a sudden, 14,000 courses will be available. So I think global access is a big opportunity as I think about learning itself.
Technology traditionally takes away the Scutwork.
Okay, so he's real excited about, he's giving a use case of how they're using AI to translate all of their courses so that it can be used in lots of different languages. But a lot of this is too about automation. You can scale with this technology, and he's just giving the example of translation, using it for translation.
Technology traditionally takes away the Scutwork. Right? You get a dishwasher, you spend less time washing dishes, more time doing other stuff. You don't have it do the fun stuff. You don't have it do the high-level stuff. You have it do the stuff that's just work-a-day. And in every part of education, K-12 and higher ed, there's an awful lot of Scutwork. And so the question...
And I would argue that the Scutwork is actually where you can really learn by just, actually going through it, working through the problem, working through the scut work, which I've never heard that term scut, but anyway, but that's, but yeah, like there's something that's lost in all of this that's not being talked about. And this isn't a dishwasher. Chat GPT is not washing your dishes. It's outsourcing your thinking for you. And narrowing it, homogenizing it.
Is, can we have our counselors spending more time actually counseling, our teachers spending more time working with individual kids, our professors spending more time, and our students with each other? If we can, one by one, kind of attack things that suck time without adding a tremendous amount of value. The simple questions when somebody's struggling with something that 100 people ask, the AI can answer. It's the more interesting questions that a human needs to step in, and ideally a human who's taking the course with you. And so this really is an opportunity to make learning a lot more human.
Yeah, and I would argue that that's a bunch of bullshit. This is not making learning a lot more human. It's exactly the opposite.
Yeah, it's interesting for Clever because our top priority is student data, privacy, and security. And so you talk to US K-12 schools and you start talking about AI and they freak out. You know, they're like, whoa, no, like, do not touch our student data. We want no part of AI. And so we find ourselves in, you know, this middle ground of like, obviously wanting to be part of leading edge technology and also wanting to really take student data privacy really seriously. So if anything, we have taken a really cautious approach to it. We're very curious. We're in the exploratory stages of figuring out how to do some with our product development. We've used it for a while with like third-party tools to help our teachers and students find help faster, like in our help centers and things like that. But as it relates to like what we do with student data and doing big initiatives right now with AI, I think it's too early for us to have a lot of confidence around what we could do that in a really safe and secure way, given all of the recent cybersecurity attacks with school districts and all of that. So yeah, we're taking a pretty cautious approach.
So she says they're taking a cautious approach. And they always talk about like, oh, cybersecurity, like they act like the biggest threat is like some cyber, you know, Russia taking your child's education. And I would taking your child's education, taking the data. But I would argue that the biggest threat is the very system itself, the very companies that are actually doing this. The threat is the very purpose for which AI was designed, I would argue. Which is cybernetic governance, and also like establishing, you know, human capital markets that are centered around learning and behavior and a whole bunch of other things. So that's one of those things that I think is a red herring, a misleading thing. It's like we're trying to protect your data from some hacker coming in, when actually the threat is coming directly from these companies themselves, and the threat is again ASU, which is head up by Michael Crow, who has CIA connections. The threat is the CIA. You know, do you really want the CIA involved in steering your child through artificial intelligence, through their education system? I don't. Well, I don't have a kid, so. But if I did, I wouldn't.
And so you talk to US K-12 schools and you start talking about AI and they freak out. You know, they're like, whoa, no, like, do not touch our student data.
That's a good sign.
We want no part of AI. And so we find ourselves in, you know, this middle ground of like, obviously wanting to be part of leading edge technology and also wanting to really take student data privacy really seriously. So
actually their main problem is a PR one. They don't, they don't really care about the issue except for the fact that people are upset about it. That's the real concern.
If anything, we have taken a really cautious approach to it. We're very curious. We're in the exploratory stages of figuring out how to do some with our product development. We've used it for a while with like third-party tools to help our teachers and
they've used the data with third-party tools. And so if you understand like how data gets passed around, you know, some company sells the company to another company and then that company sells it to another company. And it just ends up out there being used for whatever purposes anyhow. And it's usually in the terms and conditions that are built into the bill into the contract anyways, which nobody reads. Even if they did read it, they would need a lawyer in order to help them even understand it. So yeah, it's such a setup.
And students find help faster, like in our help centers and things like that. But as it relates to like what we do with student data and doing big initiatives right now with AI, I think it's too early for us to have a lot of confidence around what we could do that in a really safe and secure way, given all of the recent cybersecurity attacks with school districts and all of that. So yeah, we're taking a pretty cautious approach.
And once again, the biggest problem with this isn't actually cybersecurity attacks. The biggest problem is actually these companies themselves and who they represent.
Can I add something
Sure.
to that? If you think about the APIs that are being added to the
Real quick, an API is application programming interface. It's basically software that allows all these different programs to talk with one another and share information. And there's one called XAPI, which specifically deals with learning data, education data. And so APIs are about building a layer of interoperability. So these things, even though they're separate, they can communicate with each other. They can talk with one another. And they go by a certain set of protocols as well.
Can I add something to that? If you think about the APIs that are being added to the LLMs.
I would also say too that the APIs are kind of a governance layer as well. It's a layer to, it's a protocol layer that sets the rules.
What they really mean is that there are two separate things going on. The first one is when someone asks a question, you can parse it. You can use that model to help you understand the question and create queries and create other things on your side. And then when you have an answer for them, you can use the LLM to give them that answer in a language, either an actual language or just an idiom that they would best respond to. So when you think about adding AI to your products, don't think of it as one monolith. It's actually two separate things going on. Understanding you and then speaking to you, whatever you're going to say, in a language that you can process best.
Well, and also too about that, speaking to you, like translating it into a language, like there's a part of this, it's, you know, even in terms of coding, they want people to be able to do things without actually understanding the code or the language, to really, you know, not have a whole like large knowledge base, but to be able to do this gig work. And if you ever see like the movie Idiocracy, where like they go into the restaurant and they just point at the pictures, you know, like they don't even know how to read. They're kind of like building that kind of model where like, you know, it's like, oh, okay, we've got, you know, yeah, if you're higher skilled, we'll give you this translation. But if you're not so bright, we'll give you the picture, you know, like point at the picture.
I mean, I think there's AI, there's generative AI. So I think what's happening now is everything is kind of pulled under the generative AI rug. They're very different use cases, ultimately, as I think about it. Generative AI is also going to cause a lot of challenges to the education system. Content is easy to produce. That also creates a lot more challenges. So actually, education institutions can be in the driver's seat because they're trusted with some of this content, right? So how they will utilize this to the point which is like, let's get the mundane tasks out of the way and use AI to kind of actually help accelerate some of the learning is also very interesting. And grading, lots of TAs is a real problem.
Teachers' assistants are a real problem, according to him.
So they would want to have a lot more TAs because a lot more students need support. So how can AI actually help a TA become more efficient? That's why it makes sense.
So yeah, they say they want the AI to help the teacher, but ultimately they want the AI to be the teacher's assistant. So, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And then ultimately the AI to be the teacher itself, really reducing the use, you know, they say that, oh, this is going to free up, the teachers are going to be freed up to do work with the students. No, the teachers will be freed up to maybe go into coding or something, which is what they'll need a lot of people for. But yeah, on generative AI, basically the difference is it's AI that actually aggregates data and then actually creates something new. I won't even say original because it's kind of it's a hodgepodge. It's like a mashup. It basically creates like mashups.
With great power comes great responsibility. You know, it's going to be really exciting to see what AI does and can help with lifetime learning. At the same time, I think we need to take it really seriously and carefully and make sure that we're using it in a way that helps our students and just think about it really carefully while also taking chances.
Think about it very carefully, but take chances. Yeah, a lot of the times there's just so much lip service given, and to me it's a PR thing. It has nothing to do with what the actual plans or the goals are. Like that's just moving full steam ahead. Kind of reminds me of like ethics, you know, business ethics, bioethics. None of that is actually about stopping anything that's being planned or being done. It's about creating space to satisfy the public's concerns oh, okay, we've got an ethicist on it, we're good. They said that they're concerned about data, so I guess we're good. We're good to go. This next one is Meng Chiang. He's the president of Purdue University, who's pushing a lot of this as well and has a lot of new programs that are in the works.
I'll be happy to point out, I know you're a philosophy major, that our philosophy department actually just launched an AI degree. Wow. Right, to talk about ethics, to talk about the limit of AI. Can AI cry and love and dream? And they'll also take some programming classes, as you did, along the way. So how we teach AI, I think, is not just about STEM. It's truly across the whole university. We have applications of AI in physical AI, meaning where the atoms and the bytes meet, the virtual and the physical meet. And that's our unique minor degree in physical AI, where we grow stuff, make stuff, move stuff. What's the implication of AI to those fields? Now, the way that one can teach and learn any subjects doesn't have to be AI. It could be, say, semiconductor physics. I also believe that AI is to be embraced. Let's not stop, because how would you enforce a stoppage on AI? Would you enforce a stoppage on any mathematical studies? My former advisor at Stanford, he didn't know it would be called AI one day. So how do we stop research? And furthermore, why can't we just try to teach and learn in a new way so that what is still uniquely human-capable activities can take center stage? And let's enhance efficiency by giving some of the other stuff to AI.
That's a really prevalent philosophy that, we can't stop doing this. We have to just keep going. It's inevitable, and we have to move forward with it. And so what's even the point of having a department like talking about the ethics of it if you're not going to actually do anything about it? Like, it doesn't matter what if they come up with, oh yeah, this is actually really unethical. It doesn't matter, because they're going to do it anyways. So yeah, it's kind of interesting way of looking at the world. So this next one is called Workforce Learning in the Age of AI, and it's Rachel Romer. Now, I know the name Romer because I live here in Colorado, and we had a governor named Roy Romer, and he is her grandfather, actually. And her father, Chris Romer, he ran for governor but was unsuccessful. But he actually has been a big investor in charter schools here. So, we know the Romer family out here. Krishna Kumar, who's the founder and CEO of Simplilearn, and Steve Daly, CEO of Instructure.
The Industrial Revolution element is the part I'm thinking a lot about, because if you think back to the agricultural to the factory revolution, or from factory to knowledge economy, if you look at the lineage of a family, in most cases that was a father who's in an agricultural role, and there is time, and they know for many, many years, often decades, the trend that's coming, which is that the son will go work in a factory. Then the son's in a factory, he has a family of his own, and there were many, many years, programs, GI Bill, you name it, that got the grandson ready to go enter the knowledge economy. That time lag is what I think is different with this trend, and it actually mirrors that same graph. The rate at which technology is changing is so much exponentially faster than the rate at which industrial technology or the original knowledge technology came to market. And what that means is it's no longer the grandfather, the son, and the grandson. One, it's a woman. 59% of the folks we serve are female. Higher ed is even higher than that today. But two, she's going to have to upskill in her own lifetime multiple times, especially if she's in the 100 million Americans who does not have a college degree today. She's the most vulnerable. And so what I'm concerned about, and what we're having conversations beyond, how do we all use Chat GPT to make our services and products better, is actually, as we look at where all the disruption is going to happen, how do we take the third of the American populace, happens to be 2/3 of the American workforce today, who are most vulnerable to these changes, and how do we give them the chance to reskill on the pace of every 4 to 5 years so that they can stay on a path to the middle class so they can stay employed and have a supportive livelihood until they reach what is now a much later retirement age.
It's funny she talks about vulnerable people because this is actually a predatory thing. It's actually targeting vulnerable people, saying you're going to have to skill and reskill and keep reskilling every 4 to 5 years. And that's just, we've declared that. And that's just the way it is. You're going to have to live with that. And your access is going to be limited because if you don't do that, which you're going to be forced to do that because we're making partnerships with corporations in order to require that. And so it's extra hurdles. Skilling, it's so stupid. Learning and skilling you don't need these companies to actually learn how to do things. You learn how to do your job. And you can have those on the site job, but you outsource it and you create new markets. There are all these new markets, and then these markets are connected to other markets through the data collection and impact finance and cybernetic governance and behavioral tokenomics. And there's all these other aspects and layers of it. It's really disgusting. Yeah.
When you capture a student, then I assume you can also follow them as they move to different corporations. And so essentially you become their learning provider for a longer time.
Yeah, so when you capture the student, you've captured the student, and then you can follow them throughout their whole workforce, follow them from different companies that they go to, because they're captured, and you become their education nanny.
Yeah, we actually think of the learner or the member, learner being somebody who's already completed a program, member being the 10x larger number who are spending time on our platform, maybe using our career services, but not yet enrolled in a formal reskilling program. We think of them as our end customer. And we have very supportive companies who are also rational economic actors and understand most corporations are structured like a pyramid. You've all seen the org chart before, right? And while there are actually enormous numbers of jobs in the middle of the pyramid, it is still a pyramid, not a square or a column. And so companies are very comfortable with the return on investment of supporting an employee for a couple of years, 3, 4, 5, 6. And in fact, we ensure our programs always break even in the first year. So if the employee retains 1 year, you've already paid for the investment into Guild. But they recognize that folks are going to move on. And Lowe's is always my favorite example of that. Lowe's has more cashiers than the world will need for their business multiple years from now. So Lowe's helps their cashiers become plumbers and electricians. Because while Lowe's does not employ plumbers and electricians, the number one problem in their business, or a top problem, is they need more plumbers and electricians in the ecosystem so that when people buy their products, there's someone to install them. So I think we're going to see more ecosystem-like thinking amongst corporations like that. And I think if we do it right, that's in service of the American employee.
Yeah, so just this whole thing of like job insecurity, job instability, and you're just going to have to constantly be skilling and changing careers and switching it up because there's a whole new economic system that's built around that, and it's self-serving. They're self-interested. So this is the company's her company's website, Guild, and it's basically, again, it's a badging and skilling track and trace program that's perpetual, and you're going to have to keep doing it every 5 years, and they'll follow you wherever you go. And they've got some pretty big partnerships: Discover, Walmart, Pepsi, PNC, Taco Bell, Lowe's. Yeah, it sounds like they've already established quite a bit of business for themselves. The idea that a company that's working on education or working on access or anything like that would be predatory is kind of foreign to people. Like the idea that a humanitarian organization would be somehow predatory, it's counterintuitive to what people think of. Like, but I would argue that that these companies are absolutely predatory, and they're serving other interests.
And of course, a lot of young people, they want to like experiment with cool things like Chat GPT and whatnot, right? Like one of the examples that I see is that in India, I'm sure it must be true in US, because India is much often, because of the population and the number of people that they work. One of the best use cases of Chat GPT is how to write a resignation email. So you don't write, Chat GPT writes, you change your name and you're done.
So I couldn't exactly make out what he was saying there. He says how to write a resignation email. I'm probably hearing that wrong, but in the comments, if you can correct me, if you can tell what he actually said. But basically how to write a particular email in English, and then you just tell the Chat GPT to do it, and it'll do it for you, and just sign your name. Again, this is just, it's outsourcing things to the AI that I think we should question whether or not that should be outsourced or not, and what that does to us once we do outsource those things. What are we losing? You know, Neil, I talk a lot about Neil Postman, and he always talks about with new technologies, they always talk about what you gain, but they never talk about what you're actually losing. And so there's part of the equation that's completely left out, and there's things that we lose in the process that maybe if we thought about it, it's not a good trade-off.
There are already, as we all know, programs that were relevant 5 years ago that are not relevant today, and they're increasingly going to be programs that were relevant 2 years ago that aren't relevant today. So helping schools be very agile in their program. And I think at the end of the day, the simplest way to do that is, I can't remember which business leader has that quote of like, at the end of the day, there's two ways businesses get built. They bundle and they unbundle. And I think we are in an era of unbundling. And what I mean by that is unbundling the four-year degree, not because that's not incredibly valid, but turning it into stackable credentials and certificates that can amount to a degree for those who stay on that path, but still be valuable for those who stack one or two. And so that's where we're spending a ton of time.
A thought that came to mind in listening to this woman is just the idea of building in planned obsolescence into education, because you're always going to constantly, there are economic and other incentives built into the system in order to make sure that your knowledge base, your education is obsolete. So you can build an obsolescence into the learning model to make sure you have a returning customer. And that's what she's really emphasizing, is just like, nope, you're just going to, every 5 years, you got to keep reskilling and upskilling. And it's, we've got you for lifelong learning. Okay. This was a conversation that was had with, all of our friend, Bill Gates, and Jesse Woolley Wilson, who's with a company called Dreambox. So I took just a few clips out of this conversation.
The over optimism about the impact of technology is constant. We may overstate its potential even at this conference once or twice, given the number of elements that go into successful education.
I don't know if I actually agree with that. I think they're actually understating its potential. In other words, I actually don't think that they're sharing with people what it's actually being used for in terms of the secondary markets that are being created around all of this, and particularly around steering and cybernetic governance and creating tokenized behavior governance systems. So I actually disagree with what he said there. At first, I kind of laughed. I'm like, yeah, they're selling it and they're going to upsell it. And then I thought about it and I was like, actually, it's the opposite of what he's just said there. That they're actually understating what this thing is going to do. So,
yeah. So AI has, ever since the focus became machine learning, it's achieved some unbelievable milestones. It can listen to speech and recognize speech better than humans. It can recognize images and videos better than humans. The area that it was essentially useless in was in reading and writing. You could not take, say, a biology textbook and read it and pass the AP exam. Now, you could regurgitate the biology textbook, but in no sense would you call that understanding or the ability to read and encode the knowledge in a kind of semantic way. There were these debates about, as we scaled up large language models, how much emergent richness would come out of that. And I was actually one of the people who didn't think as much would come out of when I looked at GPT-3, I was like, it still must have some upper bound there. And it was last summer that I challenged a group, the OpenAI Microsoft group. I said, hey, when you can pass the AP biology exam, bother me. But in the meantime, I'm going to work on malaria and TB and HIV because I'm not sure. And, it was a few months after I said that then they came to me and, we had this big dinner where they showed not just barely passing, not just, oh, I guess that's a good answer, but just blowing the questions away. There were a few that it didn't get right that later we learned have to do with certain types of very abstract reasoning, including mathematics. And so the breakthrough we have now, which is very recent, is more to do with reading and writing. This incredible fluency to say, write a letter like this, write a letter like Einstein or Shakespeare would have written this thing, and to be at least 80% of the time very stunned by it. And so it's the impact on sales jobs, service jobs are phenomenal. And that's all we can say that based on the version we have now, and yet the amount of money going into making these things better is absolutely gigantic. It's not just GPT-4, it's hundreds and hundreds of companies building competitive things and building on top of it. The AI.
So yeah, he was just basically saying that like it's just blowing up in terms of its ability to present itself as this oracle of wisdom because they got it able to communicate in a language. A lot of this just has to do with the language that people could understand. It's almost like, it was able to translate what it was saying into like common language. That's really what he's kind of referring to here.
The AIs will get to that ability to be as good a tutor as any human ever could. That is, we have enough sample sets of those things being done well that the training can be done on it. So I'd say that is a very worthwhile milestone, is to engage in a dialogue where you're helping understand what they're missing. And we're not that far. We don't have that today. So overall, in health and education, this should be a leveler because having access to a tutor is too expensive for most students. And having that tutor adapt and remember everything that you've done, look across your entire body of work. I think at first we'll be most stunned by how it helps with reading, being a reading research assistant and giving you feedback on writing. Writing has been tough. What a good teacher does in terms of taking your essay and marking up and saying, no, this isn't clear and the summary should have included this, that is a high cognitive exercise. And software, except at the really trivial kind of grammar level, has had essentially zero. There have been a little bit of work, but not that much benefit, particularly once you get out of a very templated writing exercise. The amount of feedback to help me improve my writing is very low. And these AIs actually are good at that. That is what this sort of word guessing game, emergent behavior is incredible fluency at being able to read and write. So I think if you just took the next 18 months, the AIs will come in as a teacher's aid and as a feedback on writing. And then they will amp up what we're able to do in math. Although our bottleneck in math really is more of how we fit in the overall system and getting that teacher adoption.
Yeah, so I think that, the implications here are just not really being thought out fully. And I don't think it's possible to really grasp the implications of all this, of basically outsourcing education to artificial intelligence. So yeah, next up we have Sam Altman. He's the CEO of OpenAI. And he also, it looks like here he says that he also invests in nuclear energy projects. So Allison might be interested in that piece. So he's one of these people that's like being put out like another figurehead, kind of like Mark Zuckerberg or whatever. He's like the Mark Zuckerberg of nowadays for this OpenAI system. And, I tend to think that there are, the DARPA, the CIA, there are different venture capital companies that are actually behind all this stuff. And it's not so much the individual as it is there's an infrastructure that's advancing this and moving it forward. But they want us focusing on the individual. But anyways, this is just a brief interview with him.
It is somehow a noteworthy milestone that we can now put intelligence or something that feels like intelligence into computers.
I think that's an important key too. He says intelligence or something that feels like intelligence, because I think a lot of this is actually it's AI's ability to fool us is going to be increasingly more sophisticated. But how much of it is actual real intelligence? And as far as wisdom, I think it doesn't have the capacity to have actual real wisdom, which is a whole nother category.
Again, I don't want to overstate it. It's just really good software, but the software is so good now that we can do a lot of transformative things, which gets to the third part of that question. One of the things that I personally find most gratifying is what is happening with education. We've seen the arc here the fastest, a 3-part arc actually in education, which is initially people thought it was amazing. Then teachers got very nervous about what this was going to mean and what was going to happen for take-home essays and cheating and a whole bunch of other serious issues. And now we're seeing like Act 3 of that, where it's actually teachers that are driving forward use of Chat GPT in education the most. And we hear all the time from teachers doing incredible new things in their classrooms, say they've never seen students learning so fast. Students that they really thought were struggling are now getting like personalized custom tutoring all these different ways. And it's actually been the teachers that have led to the reversals of some of the Chat GPT bans in different school districts earlier. And really just amazing innovation. And then that gets us to the first point you said, which is...
He keeps looking up. I don't know if he's looking in his rear view mirror, if he's reading something or what, but that's kind of strange to me. But
which is what should we be scared of? The thing that I think we should be scared of is just the societal impact of all of this and the speed with which we have to manage through it. I think this can totally be managed, so I don't want to fearmonger, but it is going to be one of these periods in history where the rate of change is fast and the only way through it is to embrace it. What I would certainly do is get as comfortable with this technology as I could, really try to develop a native-like feel for it, and also prepare myself for a high rate of change in the world and sort of a lot of resilience and ability to adapt to new things and learn new things quickly. One of the great things about people who are growing up with ChatGPT or getting very used to ChatGPT is that you hear again and again, like, I can learn new things so quickly. And I think this ability of ChatGPT will help prepare us for this new world. I remember reading about other tools that have come along, the calculator being the most famous one, where when the calculator came out, people said, well, what are we going to ever bother to learn in a math class again? And the Industrial Revolution, people say, well, what will humans ever do? And it turns out with better tools, we just become more ambitious. We raise the expectations on ourselves. We raise the bar for what we want. But we never run out of things to do and just say all right, the world is one. We're all going to sit around and do nothing. And I have no reason to believe that will happen now. In fact, I bet quite the opposite.
So comparing this to the calculator is kind of stupid, because what we're dealing with is it's a whole nother level. You're talking about outsourcing your thinking and your knowledge, and he's talking about you're learning something. You're not. If this thing, and you go to this thing and it tells you what the answer is, and then you just regurgitate it and repeat what the GPT told you, that's not learning something. That's ridiculous. That's not actually having a base set of knowledge. In fact, it's the opposite. You're now using this thing as a crutch to tell you what reality is. What is the truth. It's not advancing your critical thinking, that's for sure.
I remember we spent 8 months after we finished GPT-4 before we released it to the world. And in that time, we were red teaming it, we were aligning it, we were trying to make it safer, we were having external audits, We were working with public policymakers to try to find where the problems are. And it's been very gratifying that people, even people who have been very skeptical of us in the past, have said, wow, OpenAI has released a more aligned, safer model than ever before. And I think that is what needs to happen. As these models get more and more powerful, we need higher standards for safety and alignment and how we're going to evaluate dangerous capabilities than we've had before. And the hard part of that is, as you said, not everyone is a good actor. And so I think...
Not everyone's a good actor. And you'll see the emblem on the screen there, ASU and GSV Summit, Arizona State University, which is head by Michael Crow, who's connected to the Central Intelligence Agency. So who's a bad actor? That's a bad actor. GSV, Global Silicon Valley, all these venture capitalists, I would argue, are also bad actors. Even if they think that they're good actors, they're serving the growth of money and capture and ultimately a system of domination, and whatever good feelings and good intentions that they may have personally are trumped and overshadowed by the very design and nature of the system that they're operating within and they're actually serving.
Need government regulation in addition to hoping that companies always do the right thing. Yeah, I think children should use it.
And he also says, we need government regulation. And I would also argue that the government are also bad actors. What regulators are actually ethical and not serving other ulterior motives, either whether it's their own personal advancement, their own political career, and also like there's a revolving door between these regulators and industry, and that's been the case for a very, very long time. So, where are the good actors that he's talking about? I don't, you might have some like powerless activist group, some small grassroots group that you maybe might go to a hearing or whatever and shout about it, but they don't have any power over any of this. So where exactly are these good actors that he's referring to? And the idea, we need government regulation. Give me a break. Yeah, how well has that worked so far with environmental issues or with other issues? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think children should use it, with permission and sort of oversight of their parents. Maybe we can make a kid mode that would be safe enough, but we certainly don't have it yet. There are a lot of people in the AI field who would like to build AI in secret in a lab. And then once it's finished, once you have a superhuman system, they would like to sort of put it out into the world all at once.
So this is a bunch of bullshit too, because you can't build the AI in secret because the AI needs the data. They have to put it out into the world in order for it to grow. You can't build AI secret in a lab because it requires insane amounts of data. And that's what all these teachers and students and they want everybody using it all day long. That's because they need you to train the AI
all at once. And I understand why they think that's safer, but I find it terrifying.
So he's painting himself as like, I'm a good guy because I want to just put it out in the world and we're going to be open and, everybody can just see what's going on. But I mean, I can't imagine that he doesn't know better. That's ridiculous. You can't build AI in a lab secretly. Like this guy knows that that's not the case.
I think for a world in which we all get to be part of the solution and defining what we want, the world has got to have contact with this and input and insight into what's happening so that we can have a discussion and figure out what we want the limits to be, what the good parts are, what the bad parts are. And so we do deploy this early. We call it iterative deployment because we want people and policymakers in our institutions to have time to wrestle with this technology because
they can't do it without doing that. It needs that data
because it's coming. And while the stakes are relatively low and while we can still make kind of any decision we want about what to do with it, to all participate in that discussion together.
Yeah, and that's a bunch of bullshit because that discussion is not happening. I mean, okay, Purdue's going to have a course on the psychology and the ethics of it, which is utterly meaningless. They're moving forward no matter what. There's no this is happening, and like he said, we can't stop it. We have to put everything into it. And so anyways, I know I don't have I'm not the best person to actually talk about this because I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it. But I did put these clips together to, hopefully maybe expand the conversation and get you guys thinking about it. Please leave comments about your thoughts and feelings around it. If you're in the education space, maybe, you can share like kind of some of your experiences. I mean, it's kind of crazy. The thing's like brand new, like it just happened and it's already like, it's so massive. And, yeah, it's kind of wild. But anyway, so that's this episode. I'll have more clips from this conference coming out. And I think I'll end with a clip from this. It was from a cyber conference that was put on by I think it was the Air Force, was the Air and Space Forces Association. So it's probably a private association representing like military contractors. I know there's
training portfolios, and he was also an Air Force.
There's someone here from Raytheon, but they also have Akash Jain, who's the Chief Technology Officer with Palantir, and the President of Palantir USG. So I think I'll end with a clip here because I think it goes into like the ideas of trusting the algorithm, trusting the this goes into like trusting the AI, whether or not you should trust the AI to tell you where to go. I just came across this clip and I thought it was pretty interesting.
How many people in the audience have actually ever used Waze? All right, so for the people on camera, it's maybe like 90% of the people. All right, how many people in the audience do what Waze tells you to do when you hit traffic? Only about 40% of you. And if I guess I'll throw two whys maybe. First why is the reason for those of you who don't do what Waze tells you to do, is it because you don't trust, like you don't understand why it's telling you what to do? Is that the reason for those that don't follow the Waze directions? Or why don't you do what Waze tells you to do? Somebody just yell it out. Oh, right there. I know better. This is like the first problem that we worked on with the DoD and the AI/ML space. And for clarity, Palantir does, I think what General Wilson really talked about, which is really about the data munging, the T&E, the ModSim environment, some of those things, and then the CI/CD of AI/ML models. We don't actually build AI/ML models, right? There are folks that are much better at that that have been studying systems for years and know exactly what this is going to look like, and they have the experts. We try to create the environment that gets them the data to do that. And the first thing we did when we sat down with operators is, we put them in kind of a SIPCOP environment. They'd have a FMV feed up. They'd have a computer vision algorithm. It'd be highlighting a truck on the screen. And we'd say, oh, it's so cool, isn't it? Like, hey, AI. And they'd be like, I don't know if I can say this on the video, but they'd be like, no shit, Sherlock. Like, there's a truck on the screen. I'm a human. I can tell you there's a truck on the screen. Who cares? Why is that important? Why do I need the AI to tell me that? And then when I think about the concept of Waze, I know better. This is the number one thing that we really run into when we're thinking about how to adopt AI and how to enable the department to drive it in to effectively become the Jarvis for humans, right? In some of these decision spaces, it's how do you make it explainable? How do you get the humans to really trust it? How do you do the training and the ModSim kind of work such that when Waze tells you to do something, admittedly, I'll admit I don't follow what Waze says most of the time as well, because I do know better. But how do you get to the point at which you're working through an ATO cycle or something, and the human says, hey, you, the machine, helped me come up with a better decision or a more timely decision or a more cost-effective solution to a problem. And we see this, I think, again, I'm not a pilot, and many of you in the audience are, but in the ways that we trust autopilot systems today and how they ultimately help with task saturation and overload. How do we get to the point where the AI is really doing that? And I think that's why these activities and the continuity kind of across industry, across the government, and really doing these exercises and training components to the point where, hey, when Waze tells us, hey, no, really, you'll save 5 minutes if you do this, we do it, right? And it actually is helpful and augmentative, and we're not, kind of pulling an office and driving into a lake because Waze told us to do so. And so the question is, and he gives this example of like, do you trust the Waze? I've always been weary of using even like Google Maps or whatever. On one hand, it's really convenient, but I also, on the other hand, I also knew like it's degrading my ability to navigate on my own. But not only that, like cybernetic governance, like
it's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. People pretend like the AI's only goal is to get you to where you want to go the fastest and best way possible. Like in this example of like, a map or whatever. And there actually are other goals and purposes of the AI system around cybernetic governance that's tied to intelligence agency, that's tied to the Department of Defense, tied to Department of Energy, that's tied to BlackRock and different companies like Goldman Sachs. Do you really want them? Like, Goldman Sachs is telling you where to go. Do you want to listen to Goldman Sachs to tell you where to go? Because in many ways, those they're steering that is way beyond just you and what your purpose and mission of using this technology is. That's much, much bigger than that's not being discussed. And I'm sure they would deny that this is even a part of it, but it is. I mean, it is. It's just a reality. There is cybernetic. These are systems of cybernetic governance around managing large numbers of people. It's not just you and what your goal is. So I'll stop there, and thank you for joining me. I have actually a lot more clips from this conference that I'm going to be going through. So I will have some more videos like this coming out very soon. Thanks. Hello, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. And I have a guest here, the one and only Alice McDowell. And do I have your volume up, Alice? And sometimes when I bring this up, I have your volume down. 1 second. Guest one. Let me
You're
bring
trying
the
to
volume.
turn me down, Jason.
I need to change my default settings because I set up my thing, and when I open it, I keep forgetting. I set my thing up to be on a MIDI controller so I can control the volume with the little thing here, but the default setting has it turned down, so I need to fix that so I'm not forgetting every time. Okay. Anyway, so first of all, Allison, I don't know how much of that you were able to catch, but I know you caught a bit of it. Any like immediate thoughts from those clips?
Well, I mean, I've been sort of banging on this drum for a long time around educational technology. That's the door I came in, and I remember back when my kid was in like middle elementary school years, like 4th, 5th grade, first seeing the papers from Pearson talking about AI in education and thinking like, this is crazy. I mean, and that would have been maybe 12 years ago. And no one was talking about AI in education. At the time, I was really sort of, we're dealing with the tests. And they were doing sort of like custom testing, like, there would be variable questions. Not every kid got the same set of questions. And I was just thinking at the time, like, this is crazy. Like, you can't check it. You don't know what's going on. You can groom kids based on like certain kids will get certain kinds of information. And, it's all being sold as personalized learning, but there's no, they have a quote unquote standard, but and the standards are just to sort of sort people in the future for gig work. And I was just really concerned about the technology back then. And again, all of it being sold as, beneficial, right? We care about you. We want to know about you and give you your custom program. But the thing about the cybernetics is it's a feedback loop. And we're not picking, the kids aren't picking where they're going and all of these pathways. And you heard the guy say, the woman say about Lowe's, right? Oh, well, we know we won't need that many cashiers, but we need plumbers. So we'll pay for that. And that essentially these big multinational companies are just steering everything. And so where is our agency? Like when they've already said, okay, so the new game is that you have to chase around every 4 or 5 years and get a new skill because we've decided to remake the economy in this direction. And maybe 4 or 5 years now, but maybe, in 4 or 5 years, it'll be every 18 months or every 6 months. And it's not human. Like we're living according to standards that are are totally disconnected from any sort of natural cycle or human intellectual capacity to process this amount of change. I mean, and they all say it like, oh, we can't imagine there's so much change, but we just have to do it, right? And we just have to do it. And, you know, we're the grownups in the room, right? And these grownups in the room are throwing stuff over, and the children, that's what I keep sort of saying, you know, the children in the natural world, they can't agree to this. Like, we should be fighting this idea of a future that everyone has to live in a gig economy on the ledger, on this pathway. And, you know, and it's hard because after all of these years, like, the narrative just gets pulled in these other directions, right? Like, let's talk about culture wars, right? Like, let's talk about which books we're going to ban, or let's talk about like bathroom things, or let's talk about these other things. I'm like, guys, there's something much bigger going on. And it's lifelong learning on the ledger, right? You're not even going to get out of it. Like, you get an associate's, you get a credential, you get a 4-year degree. You're not done. You're never going to be done. And guess what? There probably won't be any PhDs anymore because it'll all be AI. Like, what schools do you think are actually going to offer PhD programs in anything? Are there going to be any MFAs? No, it's all going to be technical education. And anyway, that's just my, it's so sad. And yeah, it's like a steamroller, and we're standing up pointing to it. And yet so many other narratives are being constructed around it that obscure what this thing is. You know, it's life as a learning game as we perform our humanity for the stupid machine and call it education.
Yeah.
You know,
it's frustrating. If you guys do have questions for us, just go ahead and post them in there. Just put the word question real in caps so I can spot it if I'm looking over here. But yeah, you had sent me this video, this short video on Clever badges. So I thought I would start. It's just like a 1-minute video. So I thought I would just start by
So I've used this a couple times, but this is like one of the saddest videos, I think, because it speaks to what we're doing to the next generation, what we're allowing to have happen and be normalized. And even what passes for creativity is here's a sheet of stickers. Which sticker do you want to decorate your badge with? And these badges are building up the digital twins of the children. I mean, this is unwaged labor. And I think you've talked about that at the end about the AI, that they can't do it in secret because they need us to build it for them. And so they're literally harnessing the education sectors, the healthcare sectors, the food and housing sectors into this thing so that we teach it. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll just play this video and then we'll...
The students at this age, they are fun to be around. You can introduce any type of subject, topic, and they're just really eager to learn. I usually log them in with their username and password. This is very hard for them because they don't know their letters and they don't know their numbers. How do I expect for them to log in? And typing in their username and password can take between 1 minute to 5 minutes, just depending on the student. And it pretty much all laid back on me for me to log them in. At first, when we met the Clever team and they came and they introduced this new concept, we're crossing our fingers because it's definitely going to change our life and our kids' lives to log into their computers. Clever Badge is a new tool that our TKs are using in the classroom. They get to wear it and then they get to decorate it in the back, and then they scan their barcode and are easily logging into their online learning programs. I feel like this is going to be a time saver for me because I will definitely get to use those extra minutes that I have for intervention programs that I run. Even to help the students go on online learning programs, if they have any questions, I feel like I can easily help them more. When they logged in using their username and password, they weren't really excited about it. Now I feel like I've seen right away that they're so eager and excited to even log in to use their online learning programs. I really want them to enjoy school and think of it as a positive thing. We want our students to strive and be the best that they can.
Yeah, ooh.
Right? Have you seen that one before?
Oh yeah, no, I've seen it before. I've seen it a few times.
It's so sad. I mean,
Yeah.
because the children are like the beginning, they're on the playground, they're playing together, and then they're contained in these headsets, right? They're isolated, they're interacting not in a community, but with the machine, right? And the idea of Clever is that it essentially pulls together and aggregates data across all these different learning platforms. So the kids, like these kindergartners, may have, multiple different programs that they're connected into, and the data is all pulled together into one place, and that's the digital twin. When I first saw it, I didn't fully appreciate that that's what it was building. But in that charter school, it's Rocket Ship Academy Charter School, and this guy Fred Ferrer is connected to a lot of the stuff in Santa Clara County with the Pay for Success Finance. That's a charter franchise, and I think that it's on purpose. This idea of Rocket Ship, you think about the blockchain mind files, right? They're literally creating mind files on these young children, and then they've brainwashed the teachers, because the teachers are reinforced that this is what it means to be a good teacher. You get all the kids signed on to get their data harvested, right? And so I don't think that woman is intentionally a hard-hearted person. I think that she's just one of these professionals who's trained into the system to perform her role, right? Which is to get all the kids logged in, right? To get that unpaid labor and to train the AI.
Well, also the idea that they break things on purpose in order to, come in after the fact. But the fact that, teachers are overwhelmed and they're looking for some relief. They're looking for some support. And there was even a lot of discussion, like in some of these clips that I showed about, like, teachers' assistants, teachers' aides, there's a shortage. And, there's this, they create the need up front and ahead of time, and it's thought out. So, I think that's important. But yeah, that's super depressing. And that's also it still blows my mind that there's not even a hint of question in a lot of people about this. It's just kind of a given, and just the power of money. So, like, even with the schools, like the schools need money or whatever, and they're just so eager to have any support. And so you won't have any critique of any, the support when it comes in.
Most of these devices are free.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
that's what it's, they're donated, right, by these grants. Hewlett Packard and, the Google Chromebooks, they're all introduced at first as free, but then it's going to be a subscription model, right? Life as ongoing subscription. That's how they do it. So, yeah. Yeah.
Well, you sent me some other stuff. I've got your map up here, the securitized sharing agreements.
I just noticed, I don't know, is there any way to zoom in a little bit closer? Okay, so on the bottom left corner is Noodle. Yeah, Noodle Partners. So one of the people was from Noodle. And that's like one of those names that just sticks out. I'm like, Noodle. And I think John Katzman is just below him in the blue dot. And so he's the CEO of Noodle. And Noodle is a partner with something called FlowPoint Education Management, which is there to the right of Noodle Partners. And if you look just above FlowPoint Education Management in the blue dot, Christopher Riccardi, he's the guy who created Edly, that is going to securitize the income sharing agreements. And if you look up Christopher Riccardi, there's a Wall Street Journal article about him that describes him as he's the grandfather of collateralized debt obligations, right? And so he's the father of collateralized debt obligations that crashed. He was at Merrill Lynch, and he created the derivatives objects that crashed the global economy in real estate. And then the Wall Street Journal article is like, now he wants to do it for higher education. Just what he did to precipitate the last Great Recession is now he's going to do it with these income sharing agreements. So I made this. This is October of 2020. I guess. And if you go all the way over to the right side of the map, the other side, we're moving. Yeah. There you can see income sharing agreements and Purdue. There's Purdue. So you had the president of Purdue there, right?
Oh, yeah.
You were saying he was selling a lot of the stuff. So Purdue was the lead on the income sharing agreements. And they had this research foundation. Purdue Global is a big online learning program. They're connected with Kaplan and this VMO education. They were doing the processing of the income sharing agreements. And, at the time that I saw this initial talk, this is sort of a map that I made of a talk at ASU GSV a couple years ago. I thought, back a boiler, the income sharing agreement is called back a boiler, that this was going to be for 4-year college. And this is what they would trot out as the answer to student loan debt was these, you sign up and someone will pay for your tuition and then they'll garnish your wages once you get a job. And that's the idea. Of course, there's only going to be certain kinds of degrees that will be attractive. Probably art history will not be a degree anyone's going to want to invest in. It'll be, coding or blockchain or biotech or, what have you. But what after the lockdowns happened, I realized is that it's going to be for the reskilling. And so it wasn't strictly just for the 4-year colleges, what we traditionally understand as higher education. It was it got, I think, woven into the career impact bonds that social finance was doing, the human capital. So, yeah, it's a bummer. And, the other thing about Purdue is it's also home to the sentient world simulation. Right. So we've got that. And I'm pretty sure that Melanie Swan, before she let out to go to England, that Melanie Swan was at Purdue as well, the blockchain mind file lady. So yeah, you can just blockchain your way into the cloud mind with your securitized income sharing agreement.
Yeah. So what's the sentient, what did you say? I wasn't.
Sentient world simulation. I think sentient world simulation. That's sort of like the digital twin world that's been going on for a long time with the military. A lot of times people talk about the sentient world simulation, but it's out of Purdue as well.
Okay.
So
yeah, and I guess that guy's new to that position. He's the new president. So Mung.
The new president at Purdue.
Yeah, the guy that was the clip that I showed. The president Mung. I guess he said he's new to that position. But yeah.
So I just this idea of these income sharing agreements, and then I showed a clip before when we were doing the OER about them tokenizing them, right? So they'll go on blockchain, they'll be turned into tokens, they'll be liquid assets and tradable, just like the mortgages. And I'm just like a broken record on this, but I noticed that a lot of the presentations that you shared, a lot of the clips were about not just traditional education, but like workforce development, right? This is the lifelong learning on a ledger. It wasn't just like, there was a little bit about little kids, but mostly it was reskilling adults. And so the reskilling adults looks like you taking out tokenized income sharing agreements. Oh, you're a cashier at Lowe's? Well, you got to take out a tokenized income sharing agreement so that when you do your after hours class in plumbing to get a plumbing certification, it's covered, right? And a lot of this, if you look back and think back to, it was such a big deal at some point that Starbucks was paying for college for their baristas, only it was part of like this scammy type of stuff. It was like online schools for the skilling. It was exactly the stuff they're talking about with Lowe's, is they're just moving people around. They know that they can't totally crash everything. So they've got to keep people busy and keep people in debt or keep people attached to things so that they can manage, where they are in the economy.
Yeah. And as to me too, even just the whole certification, thing is problematic because there'd be jobs where people that have the knowledge and skills for it, but they don't have the piece of paper that costs like a crazy amount of money that gives the
but now that
authority.
You can put on a VR headset, Jason, and show them in the VR, and then you can earn your badge, and then you won't need the education.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And micro credentials.
You have an answer for that. Yeah. A nano or Pico credential. Yeah.
Pico credentials.
Exactly. Do you know how to pet a dog correctly? Well, put on the VR headset. Show us that you can pet a dog correctly, and then you can get the dog walking job.
Well, and even if you look into some of the things that they offer, it is kind of ridiculous in terms of like what the actual education training programs. It's watch this video and then answer these questions or something. It's a very dumbed down version of education.
I don't think they actually think people are going to do the skill. Like here, do this welding certification in our virtual reality simulation. They're never going to let you weld. They just want you to perform that you can follow the directions, right?
Yeah.
And then get the badge. But there's the AI robot thing is going to be doing the welding. And then when you're done with that certificate, they'll say, oh, go over here and learn how to do, nutrition counseling and get that badge or whatever. And then, no, you're not doing nutrition counseling. That's an app.
we just switched it. We just switched it today.
Yeah. Exactly.
Have you ever seen? Well, there's a book, Catch 22. There's actually a really great series based on it on Hulu. But it was like that whole thing. They just keep changing the rules of the game as you go along. I mean, it's just like it keep you on the hamster wheel. Somebody asked about the actual physical systems that went forward. Are they more like an ant colony or a man-o-war or the octopus? So they're giving different metaphors. Something you can spring borax on doesn't seem to be that resilient to me. I mean, I would say the ant thing is pretty resilient when they, because you have everyone's an ant.
Number.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I didn't even talk yet about the microbes. So in the Adrian Tchaikovsky book, because I'm listening to the octopus book again, towards the end, it's about this microbial colony that wants to essentially inhabit the life cycle of all of the beings and soak up all of their knowledge. And I think it might be like some sort of cyanobacteria or whatever that like incorporates the DNA of all of its host stuff into anything nearby. It just sucks it up, and it keeps this giant library archive type of thing. And so eventually the AI embodied former human tries to create a détente with the microorganism colony by saying, like, when you suck up all the life, then it stops because there's no more life. Like essentially what it does is like an alien hijacked the brain of the thing and then filled up the brain. And then you're just kind of frozen, and you can only do backwards from there, any of the stuff, but you can't go forwards because there's no life left. It's just frozen in that moment. So she's like, let's figure out some way that we can like work together, but you don't actually absorb everything and kill it off. And they're like, okay, well, we'll try to figure that out. So but in this microbial colony, it's like every cell holds the full identity of the archive of the being. And so it is resilient in that way. And it's funny, that section about corporate memory, it reminded me of that, like the microbial colony. Like if you can fragment out in some sort of holographic unit that every bit has the whole like into it, then you have this resilient thing. And it doesn't matter. You can just wipe out a bunch of them as long as it's all repeats and it all has the same information. The individual has no value.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't quite.
Think this guy knows a lot of stuff. This Adrian Tchaikovsky. I think he knows some stuff.
I need to read more science fiction.
Yeah, they tell you all of the things. But so, I think. I just ended up today. I did like a 6.5 hour presentation, 6.5 hour thing. I haven't done it live. I recorded it. I have to edit it up and stuff. But it's on these nuclear reactors and these, and I don't know. In some of it, I just kept saying, like, I need for people to take it to the next level of understanding distributed cognition and understand the cybernetic nudges as computational structures and social computational structures. Like we need to get beyond the the depopulation, Klaus Schwab agenda. That's not helpful. It is something more complicated that's going on. Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, and I kind of have been ranting about this lately, but like the quote unquote resistance is so caught up in its own version of the ant computer experiment, but they don't know that's what they're in. So they're running around running the ant computer of the version of the resistance model, and they don't even know, and they can't even see it because they're like the fish in the water.
Yeah, I've kind of given up. And on this, I need to like work on articulating it differently because I keep repeating like cybernetic governance. I probably sound like a broken record too. And it's like, okay, cybernetic governance. Like, no, you don't understand like what that actually entails. Like, what does that mean to live within a system that is steering you for some predetermined outcome?
Right. And the thing is, they're going to make it not like, I think the goal is to make it tolerable. I mean, if not somewhat fun or challenging. Like that's what the Michael Crows of the world, that's what the In-Q-Tel, the Niantic, the augmented reality is life as a game. Live action role playing with people towards some outcome, and we don't really understand the game we're in or what the rules are, and they can change arbitrarily. Right. That's what they're building. But it's not exactly like, I know for a while I was describing it as the open air prison, and but I think that they won't want the most people to understand it as a prison. They'll want them to understand it as an exciting opportunity, right?
Yeah, for sure. And oh, I forgot I had a thought there, but I lost it. So yeah, we have Noodle partners up here. This is, you were talking about administrative online.
So that's most it. Yeah, we don't have to go super deep, but like Riccardi, can we click on Riccardi? So he was the Flowpoint education management guy. And like, you can see his background, former president of Institutional Financial Markets, former managing director of Merrill Lynch. And that's where he was working on the CDOs, Credit Suisse, Prudential. Prudential is a major player in the career impact bond space and the human capital space. And then going on to Edley. And there's also Play Sports, interesting AI video editing. There you go. Personalized clips of sports. So the AI will hand you your sport, the most recent hot takes of your sporting events. And let's see, Mead Holdings, finance firm focused on leverage credit investments. And Cohen and Company, Philadelphia Investment Bank, managing credit fixed income investments. Yeah, and look, Wharton, Penn. So it's always goes back to Wharton, right? And the London School of Economics. So so this guy, right? Collateralized debt obligations, like securitize your toddler. And a while back, I did that short story reading of Overvalued, right? Where there's like, and to me, actually that series in Wire, I think maybe it was in Slate. It was sponsored by Arizona State University, actually.
Oh, wow.
Like it was sort of a futurist, fictional foresight predictive programming series. And it was done in like 2018. So so old Mikey Crow has known what's up for some time.
Yeah, definitely. He's a key player. And I just, the way that they're presenting the AI as being just this neutral tool that you can utilize, that you can gather information from, and understand.
It's wrong.
It's not that. Yeah, there's
Do you remember what it said about me?
Yes. No, I mentioned that actually in the talk.
You did? Okay.
Yeah, and I didn't have it right in front of me, but yeah, basically it was someone had asked the Chat GPT about Allison's work. Can you summarize Allison's work for me? And it totally misrepresented.
Well, and then it said, as if I were a child. So I think maybe that's what did the leading part. It was only about educational technology. It was nothing about impact finance or all of the other things I talk about. It was really limited to ed tech.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, Allison doesn't want it to be used to hurt people, but Allison would like for it to be used to make things better. And I'm like, no, that's not what I said.
Yeah. It implied that you're actually, it took the kind of the position of like the RFK Jr. position, like I'm okay with vaccines as long as they're safe. And that's not, that's when it comes to this technology, that's not your position. It's you've got a pretty hard no. So yeah, it was actually, but I noticed the way it was written is actually very political. It was actually making a value judgment, and an inaccurate one at that. And so again, it's a binary thing anyways. So like, even if it, was trying to do the right thing, it's going to be limited because there's a thing in the world called paradox, and there's a lot of problems, with ethics, that there are conflicts of interest and complications that I don't think that these technologies, even if we wanted to pursue them, have the capacity to deal with, Yeah.
And I think people are like anthropomorphizing it somewhat, right? They're acting like it's a thing or a person or an entity. And I'm like, it's not.
Well, there was those the studies when I need to look it up again, but I actually learned about it from an Adam Curtis documentary series where they were the computers. You know about this, that they were psychologists and they had the computers. People were doing therapy with the computer. This was back in like the 60s.
Right. I forget what the name of it was.
The computer would just say back to the person. Yeah. But people were actually really getting connected to it. Like it was actually having an effect on them, and they were coming out of it like, oh, that was really helpful. And all the thing was doing was just repeating back to you what you said to it.
Yeah. I remember that. Well, and the thing is, one of the things Lynn and I talked about was early on, there was this, what was it called? It was some sort of robot thing. Genie, like the something math genie. It was like a math genie. iReason was the company, and it was a little genie chatbot for young children, like elementary school age children, help them as their math tutor. And it would like be in a little chat box. And, it's hard because I've, had circumstances where on social media, people approach you in a chat or a message, and you, over time, feel like that person, or and then you realize later, like you didn't, you didn't actually. And, but imagine like training these little children to become accustomed to these AI agents. They're helpers, right? And then I think eventually, like the children moved on, and I don't know if the school district discontinued the program or they graduated from it, but they no longer had access, and it caused real emotional harm to the children because they had gotten attached to this chatbot thing, and that's a scary proposition. It's really. Oh, did you take away there was one more?
Oh no, I can bring it back.
One
up.
last one about the intelligent computing, the ICT. So that was the last one I wanted to bring up. Can you make it a little bit bigger?
Yeah,
I don't know if you can expand it at all.
I don't know if I can. I don't have it
Can't
tooled.
expand it.
Let me see if. Oh wait,
okay.
there's a zoom. Hold on here.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, so this it's amazing how far back this goes. So this is the University of Southern California Institute for Creative Technologies. And we talked about this place before. It sort of came out of like the Army Research Lab, and Disney was sort of like the birthing of like, hey, let us use simulation technology to benefit both of us. And they were developing synthetic people. So 2008, so that's 15 years ago, right? And you see who was involved in this meeting about your intelligent lifelong learning companion. And that's going to be your iReasoning genie, only you don't graduate out of it. It stays with you your whole life. And like that woman said, you get captured, right?
Yeah.
You got captured by the thing, and it's your learner, your learning leader for your whole life. But you look and see who the leads are on this, and you've got U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command, so TRADOC, Army RDE-COM Creative Learning Technologies, Army Research Institute for Behavioral and Social Sciences, Army Research Institute. Okay, so there's several from there, 3.
Yeah.
And then the USC Institute, and then a variety of other schools. But
I see Arizona
this
State
US
down here.
Research Institute for Behavioral and Social Sciences, BAE Systems, right? Psychology software tools. They do not understand that what they're introducing what they're pairing children or employees up with are military high-level psychology manipulation systems.
Yeah, and everybody just wants to ignore that. Like, do you realize who the people who's behind this? Like, you want to just pretend like that's not a thing, and there's not a history there. There's,
I know. It's crazy. And then, part of what I was talking about today, this lecture or this talk that I was sort of deconstructing, they were framing RFK Jr. as like this anti-imperialist peacekeeper, because he had some page on his campaign thing about peace. And like, we can't be an empire abroad and be strong at home. So we're going to, pull back and all of this stuff. And on the one hand, yeah, like I used to consider myself anti-imperialist, but I don't think we understand what the empire is. Like, the empire is kind of us all the time, even at home, even in the behavioral psychology divisions.
Yeah.
And so you can talk about weapons, but it goes back to the stuff with Ukraine. Sure, there's stuff that's missiles and specific bombs and different things, but then there's a lot of weapons that are covert, and there's psychological weapons, and they're not just used on people outside the United States. Our government is anybody who knows about MK Ultra and everything, like, it's been going on a really long time, only now it's totally normal, and they call it your lifelong learning companion.
Yeah. Well, like with me, I consider myself an environmentalist, and what then you started to go in and you started to see kind of who's behind some of these large environmental organizations and on all these markets that they're creating around there. And so it's like, is your choice to see, I suddenly don't care about the environment anymore because of this thing. Or like peace, we're seeing how peace is going to be used as a weapon, as a tool to bring forward these other systems. And it's like, yes, I'm for peace, but I'm also opposed to this. Yes, I care about the environment and the ecology, but I'm also opposed to these programs that they're putting forward that are in the name of that. Black Lives Matter is another thing. Like, I support the general cause of, yes, the people of color have been mistreated, especially, but all people a lot of people are being mistreated by the police, and there's a serious problem with police brutality. But then you realize that the the Black Lives Matter movement was actually serving another function. It's actually, you have billions of dollars being given to this group, and they're not actually. Mayor Bloomberg is not, he's not coming at this with a deep concern for, people of color and police brutality. So all these different issues, you can still care about the issue and recognize that it's being exploited with ulterior motives. So,
but like what I would say is, if you're going to be an anti-imperialist, what we need to be looking at is not just missiles and directed energy weapons and whatever, but we actually need to understand that our intelligent lifelong learning companions are weapons against natural human beings. These are weapons that are weapons against consciousness, and they're being directed, at all of us, but those little children at Rocket Ship Charter School with the stickers and their clever badges, that is a weapon. And it's not okay. And, and guess what? I bet, I doubt any of those people went to Davos, right? They're all in Southern California or Georgia or Pittsburgh, right? They're or Boston. These things are not some way out thing over there. These are weapons that are being used against all of us. And so if we want to truly understand anti-imperialism, we have to come to terms with our educational technology sector is a weapon.
Yeah.
It is a massive weapon system against people, all people.
And social media.
And that underlies markets.
I think social media is a weapon.
Yeah, I think it is too. But we're talking about educational technology in this particular chat. So I just want to emphasize, I think that educational technology as a weapon that is being used to steer people into a global gig economy where their data will be used to train machines, to try to be human, and to steer us into gamified exercises that we don't understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody else have any other questions on there? I just saw the one, but I appreciate you all joining us.
Well, I would just encourage, if people haven't been following along, Lynn and I have so far 3 parts, and I've recorded a 4th, and I haven't put it up yet, on open education resources, which are essentially going to be, people interacting with this online digital content, including in VR and including for apprenticeships and lifelong learning. And that's all going to be woven into these impact markets. So definitely check out that playlist on our channel. And I guess I'll be pulling this, the Q&A part on my channel. But if you're watching this on my channel, be sure to go back and subscribe to Jason's channel, Argus Fest YouTube. I'll have a link to that so that you can listen to like the full program. And then you'll have, a whole nother person to listen to, because Jason's doing a lot of good work on this.
Well, I appreciate you joining me, because I know that this is your, this is your wheelhouse. You've been working on this since, long before I even met you. So it's really helpful for me to kind of talk to you after going through, because I've been watching all these talks, and it's kind of tiring to go through them. Just listening to the language and the it's
well, the thing is, like the professional, like the credentialed professional, Jason. I know you talk about that a lot, but it's got to be just, it kind of is soul sucking to sit there and watch people front this machine and normalize it and act like it's okay, and realize that like their bread and butter, their job, they're rewarded for going along, and we're all allowing something that is totally unnatural to advance on humanity.
Yeah, and they bought into it themselves. So like I don't think that they want to do harm or anything for the most part. Like I mean, I think there are players within that field that just really don't care, and they'll lie and do whatever just to make a buck. But I think there are a lot of people even in that space who really do care about children and have bought the story.
Yeah.
And it's easier for them to get along, to function within that space. And it's also a bubble. They live inside of a bubble. And any critique, they'll every once in a while they'll give some little lip service to, some like peripheral concern that's out there. But there's never any deep dive or any it's never given any real attention. And it's also even at that, it's also, again, like not even the core of the problems with it, so it'll just be like some tokens concern. We don't want hackers to hack your data or whatever. And
we don't mind if we're going to throw you into a snake pit of gig economy AI badge,
venture capitalists, hedge funds.
It's like going to be like ongoing gladiator battles to like chase down the gig economy job. It's just
yeah, well, it's just a matter of time before people are fighting over their tokens, and yeah, the future looks bright.
Well, I appreciate you going through and sort of immersing yourself in all of this.
Yeah, I've got more coming out. I've got other stuff around lifelong learning, and even in this, it's like some of these talks that kind of fall into different. I'm trying to organize them a little bit into categories. So I think I covered most of the stuff I could find on AI on this one, though. Cool. Well, yeah, thank you all for joining us. And yeah, we'll have another one of these coming out soon. And thank you, Allison, for jumping on and chatting with me for a minute at the end here. So, all right.